Could Beauty and the Beast really take place in the 18th century? Or did it occur years from now after a technological apocalypse where people are forced to survive? You'll find out right after this. Hey everybody, I'm Taylor from Beard vs. Geek, where I show you it is okay to be a man and a geek at the same time. Today we are back in the Disney universe and we are talking about Beauty and the Beast. Not the live action one, but the 1991 fun cartoony one. I am convinced that Beauty and the Beast could not take place in the 18th century, where it is actually set and written. And here's why. Well, there are a lot of different clues. First off, when Belle is getting a tour of the castle, the wonderful little pudgy clock guy said this.
The pseudo facade was stripped away to reveal a minimalist rococo design. Note the unusual inverted vaulted ceilings. This is yet another example of the late neoclassic Baroque period. And as I always say, if it's not Baroque, don't fix it.
The thing is that neoclassic Baroque architecture isn't really a thing. There's neoclassic architecture, and so that's how we have buildings like the White House and Congressional Hall and all those type of things with the pillars and the columns and everything. That's neoclassical architecture. And Baroque architecture took place between 1600 and around 1750. And that's how you get stuff that looks like this. So neoclassical Baroque architecture isn't really a thing. I mean, it is possible that you do have buildings that have a little bit of Baroque in them and have a little bit of neoclassical in them, which means that that castle was built around at least the late 18th century, so mid to late 1700s. Well, although building and remodeling castles at that time was a thing in Europe, since we know that this story takes place in France, it's an odd combination. And so we know that that prince must have had a lot of money, or at least his parents had a lot of money, in order to perform those renovations and to make a castle, which was originally made to be a fortress, into more of like a palacey show-off, we're wealthy and we're better off than you type of thing, which happened in Europe all the time. Now, two main clues comes from the song Be Our Guest, which is where all of the different plates and the people who work there, hundreds of whom, basically tell Belle about how they came to be in this condition for 10 years, and how they long to serve people. But there's two big things that they did that would not have been possible in the late 18th century. One of which is this. A bunch of the forks and silverware make this shape, which looks an awful lot like this shape, which is the Eiffel Tower in Paris. But the Eiffel Tower wasn't constructed until 1889 for the World's Fair that happened in Paris. So this shape would not be known to the people of France in the late 1700s. That's about 100 years off. This means that Belle, the servants in the castle, would have to know about the Eiffel Tower, which means that they would have to be around past 1889. You know, that's nice, they're French, whatever. And then the spoons did this. This is synchronized swimming, which was originally called water ballet, which had its first competition in the 1890s, and which actually became a growing sport in the early 20th century. And since we're talking about silverware here, odds are that the people who turned into the silverware was not like athletes. Which means that they needed time to perfect this routine, which means they needed time to learn how to do water ballet, which means they probably have to take place during the 20th century. But the problem is that we know exactly what happened in France in the 20th century. We know exactly who the different royalties were, or are, and none of them got turned into a beast, and none of them employed hundreds of servants that got turned into, napkins. It couldn't have taken place in the late 18th century because of the synchronized swimming and the Eiffel Tower. It couldn't take place in the 20th century because we know exactly what happened in France in the 20th century and exactly who all the nobility were and what happened then. And the events of Beauty and the Beast couldn't possibly have taken place in the 20th century. Therefore, that leaves the future. Well, let's talk about the future. Now, in Beauty and the Beast, Belle's father was thought of being absolutely crazy and a nut job, although harmless, because he invented technology. Because he wanted to build a device that chopped lumber automatically and that stacked it for him. Because he made it a device that allowed you to see who was on the other side of your door without a peephole. So what kind of thing would prompt so many people to say that that guy is crazy for inventing and embracing technology? Could it be people who's had their entire way of life taken away because of technology? Technology is the way that human beings have become the dominant species on this planet. We have used tools, and we have developed tools in order to do all sorts of freaking things. We do not have the natural ability to run down a cheetah and to kill it. But with tools and technology, we have been able to kill cheetahs and all sorts of other predators who were trying to prey upon us or were competing with us in order to get deer, elk, and other types of animals. Now, what if that technology turned on human beings? Well, this is a lot to deal with sci-fi. A lot of sci-fi has to deal with technology rising up and destroying human beings. Take The Matrix or Terminator or, well, anything, really. A lot of sci-fi is about that. So it is possible that Belle's father is shunned for embracing technology, a thing which destroyed the human race, which means that humans had to revert to a time period where technology was fully under their control, where they had no fear whatsoever that that technology was going to turn around and bite them in the butt. And that would be the 18th century. For example, take the Amish, who have devoted their lives to not letting technology control their lives. And by doing so, they've been able to stick around through all sorts of technological and industrial revolutions for around 200 years, and they're still going strong. What if humans use that as a model to embrace a time period where they could control technology instead of technology controlling them? But you may ask, what about all of the people not knowing who the Beast was? This was another major thing that I couldn't really grasp my head around until I did a little bit of digging. You see, while watching the movie, the Beast sends Belle's father in a carriage to, quote, the village, indicating that the village is one village. Yet this village had 100 or so occupants in it that had no idea that there was a castle or a prince that got turned into a beast a decade ago. 10 years, and suddenly not only their prince got turned into a beast and fell off the face of the earth, but also all of his hundreds of servants got turned into who knows what and fell off the face of the earth, and everyone just forgot about that? Well, what could cause such a thing? I found out that the only thing that could cause that kind of a mass amnesia would be lead toxicity, which has a bunch of different side effects, making some people really gaunt, hair loss in some people, not hair loss in other people, but also the proper doses would cause mass amnesia, memory loss, and general forgetfulness. And that does fit this entire village, and one of the things that is very popular in that village is water. There are fountains, there are wells, people are drinking all of this water. It is feasible that these people have been drinking this lead in their water. This lead toxicity has gotten into their brains and has shorted out their short-term memory so that they forgot that they had a prince a decade ago, that that prince had hundreds of servants, and that all of them dropped off the face of the earth after getting transformed by a magical person. But what would cause lead toxicity? I don't know. What about all of the technology that has lead in it, that has somehow disappeared and probably got buried so that we would forget about it? Therefore, I submit to you that the 1991 Beauty and the Beast film actually does not take place in the 18th century, but takes place in a distant future after a technological rebellion has occurred and has been diminished, and that technology was buried in the ground, causing lead to go into the water supply, that water supply being drunk by the human population, who has forgotten about their prince and the prince's servants, and the prince and the prince's servants being transformed by an enchantress into all of these inanimate objects, and thus causing ridicule on Belle's father, who wants to develop more technology. And that meaning that the servants of that beast who have been transformed into forks and spoons and whatever knows about the Eiffel Tower and synchronized swimming. But if you know of a different answer, let me know in the comments section down below. And if you like that video, go ahead and subscribe, because I show you how it is okay to be a man and a geek at the same time. In fact, you can check out these manly and geeky videos right over here, because after all, if the women don't find you manly, they should at least find you geeky. And until next time, don't go shaving on me.